Oh my goodness, guys. Good morning and shalom, my dear friends. Shalom on this blistery cold morning. How are you guys? And how is your week going? How cold is it where you're at? We were 24 degrees this morning, and I may look a little tired and haggard, and it is early in the morning, but we decided to beat the crazy crowds, especially as we get closer to Thanksgiving. One of our little grocery stores that we like to go to, it has lower prices and stuff like that, but it is crazy during the day. So we decided we would go. I think we got there about 5:30 a.m. and it was still dark. Everything was quiet. We got into the store and it was only us and all of the staff, filling the shelves. So it was cold. And so I already have had 2 cups of coffee. So this is a cup of tea with lemon, just to warm me back up and soothe my throat from the cold. So anyways, let's dig into the Word of God this morning. So I'll be right back. Okay, let's get started. It is day 3, I think it is, in our journey here. And this is the 4th video, which confuses things, but we did have a prep before our days. So yeah, we are on day 3. Yesterday, tell me, how did you guys dig? Did you find some of the who's and the where's, the people and the places? Tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you discovered yesterday. And then also I put in yesterday's description, actually not in the description, on the comments, that also you can find the what's. So things like if you're in our passage in the New Testament for the YouTube channel, we are doing Jesus feeds the 5,000. And so you might ask questions like, what was the food like? Because they were searching for food. And what kind of fish did they catch in the Sea of Galilee? And maybe what kind of bread did I know they had barley bread, and then I think they had one other bread. So that's a really fun little venture to go on. So yesterday was all about investigating. And today is all about exploring. Kind of the same thing, but totally different. Today we're going to look at the words. We're going to look at the way the author wrote it, and stuff like that, to see if we can find any other details. So our first step in that is, once again, we're going to reread the passage. Yes, we read that passage every single day. And this might be where you choose to listen to it instead of reading it or listening to it in another translation. So you'll reread that. It'll be pretty quick. But this time you're going to look for a few different things. And your first step is to scan it for any key words that stand out to you. I did that earlier this morning, and I'll show you in a little clip here in a second. But keywords that stand out to you. So you'll notice in this clip, I was doing it on the New Testament in Matthew, where he's feeding the 5,000. And I came across some words like compassion or food, because, Jesus had compassion on the crowd. I know he had gone to a solitary place and then they followed him. And so he had compassion on them. And so I wrote that word down. I underlined it. You don't have to underline it in your Bible. You can just have a tablet right next to you. And then I saw the word provide, even though it wasn't a word used, but I saw Jesus providing. I saw Jesus providing for everyone. And he had the disciples give. So I actually wrote gave, and they had plenty left over. So I actually wrote plenty left over. And then after you've got the words from your passage kind of written down, things that just stood out to you. And each time you read, you might come up with something totally different. But just that day, what is God kind of probing you? What are you seeing as a theme or some words that are important to the passage? Write those down. And then the really fun part is look them up in the dictionary. I just grabbed my phone and just Googled it, definition of food. And then I came up with that definition, or definition of provide, or compassion. See, now food, you would think, I don't need to look up that definition. I know what that means. But food, it talked about maintaining or provides life and growth. Well, we know that, but just looking up the definition brings a whole new level of me thinking about how God provides for our life and for our growth. And so that, even though it was just a simple word, I looked it up in the dictionary, and it just brought in a whole nother level of that I can sit and be thankful to all that He's provided, and that He always makes sure that I have enough for my life and for me to grow, which isn't always, the things we want, the things that are a little bit harder that make us grow. That's still God providing us food. So the other thing is after you've typed in definition of, or looked it up in a dictionary, don't forget to look it up biblically. So there's a couple different ways. You can actually just put biblical definition of provide, and it's going to give you another layer to look at. You also can go back to your concordance in the back, and the concordance is also, it's a dictionary concordance in a lot of Bibles. You can look your word up. It's going to give you the biblical definition, and it's also going to give you a list of other verses with that word in it. So you can be looking up a few others if you've got some extra time, maybe later in the day or after work or something. Then start to chase all of those and say, oh, here's some other times that God provided. Here's where He provided in the Old Testament. Here's where Jesus provided in the New Testament. So that's a really good little trail you can go down, where you just start to feel His kind of loving arms around you. And then if you are in our local study Bible, there's Bible study, then we are studying David and the temple. And so maybe you could go back and look up the times that God, because David's going to provide all of the components for the temple. And you can go back into Exodus and see where God provided all of the components for the tabernacle, stuff like that. So whatever passage, you could do this with any passage, is you're going to write down those key words. I'm going to show you right here where I actually this morning was sitting going through and trying to find some of those key words, and it took me down a road where I actually ended up even finding a video from the Bible Project. I'm going to put that down in the description on compassion, which opened up a whole nother world. So let me do that real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, now that you have seen all the key words and kind of looked those up, now go back through your passage and now think about repeated words and phrases. A lot of times, it depends on where you're reading in the Bible, but many of the authors of the Bible had a technique where they would repeat things that they felt were important. And I think God has that, where he tends to do that in our own lives. When he's not quite getting your attention, he'll repeat something, and then you'll go and talk to somebody and they'll repeat it to you. And then you'll hear a song on the radio and it repeats. Well, the same thing happens in the Bible, is when you're studying a passage, something will start to get repeated over and over and over again. And you have to stop and go, wait a minute, I just heard that same sentence or that same word over and over again. So take a look at your passage. Is there any words that are repeated or any phrases that are repeated? I want to give you an example of a passage that really works in that. The Old Testament tends to even stick with that a little bit more, although there's a lot in the New Testament that in your passages will have repeated. They want you to hear something, so they just keep repeating it. But it happens even more in the Old Testament. So when our study group was going through Exodus, we were at the end, and they were getting ready to make the tabernacle and the priestly garments, and God's like, okay, I want you guys to make a home for me, where I'm going to come and meet with you. Not that I need to live there, but I want a place where I can come and meet with you. And so he started to give Moses directions on how the altar was to be made. I mean, very specific, to the point where most people, when they read this part of the Bible, they kind of start yawning and getting really bored. Whenever you feel like you're getting bored, look for the little nuggets in between the lines and stuff. And so from about Exodus 39 and 40, it's some of that, the priestly garments, you're like, yawn, yawn, yawn. But there's always this sentence, and you'll see it. I'll show you me finding it in the video. And I highlighted all mine in pink when we studied it. So you can just see tons of them. And the sentence or the phrase is, and the Lord, and they did all that the Lord commanded. I counted about 16 of them between these few chapters. It was like he would say, the Lord commanded Moses to have them make the instruments like this, or make this like that. And then it would say at the end, and they did all that the Lord commanded. And then they'd list some more stuff, and then it would say, and they did all that the Lord commanded. When we were studying that passage, we were thinking to ourselves, why does it keep repeating? And we really began to realize how important details are to God, and how important obedience is to God. And so through that passage, we learned that when God tells you to do something, you should do it exactly just as the Lord commanded, or as the Lord commanded. You know, and it really made us look at our lives when we were reading through this group of passages, and look at our own lives and say, am I doing exactly what the Lord has commanded me to do? And that's where the author of that passage wanted us to know that. There's other ones where I know in John, I'm trying to remember if it's like around John 14, 15, 16, something like that. The word love is repeated a crazy amount of times. It's Jesus talking about, if you love me and I love you and I loved them, and because you love me, you obey me, and because I love you, I do. And I went through and counted at one point, I don't have that number in front of me now, how many times the word love was repeated in about 3 different chapters. It was a crazy amount. Also, The word obey. I counted how many times Jesus says the word obey, how many times he says love, how many times there was another one, joy, just so many great where you can actually count and say, okay, obviously Jesus is wanting me to know something here, because in 3 chapters he says the word love this many times. And so really stopping in your tracks and saying, okay, Jesus is basically telling me, like here, this is 13:34. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Then he goes on to say, whoever keeps my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. Skipping down, I'm in 14 now, 23. Anyone who loves will obey my teaching. My Father will love them. And it just goes on, and then it gives you on how you can do that. It's by connecting to the true vine, which he is the vine. So he gives you what he expects and then how to accomplish that. And you find that just by looking for keywords, repeated phrases, repeated words. Some passages are going to have more than others. Other passages you'll go, that there's not much there, and you just move on. And let me show you what I found in some of my studies this morning. And then we come to the final thing for today, on your day number 3, is contrast or conflict. Is there some kind of a contrast? Are they, many passages will show, one side versus the other. Proverbs is really good at that. It shows you if the fool versus the wise. So is there a contrast? Or is there a conflict? So let me tell you what I found for the 2 passages we're studying for both groups. One is in the First Chronicles 22, 23, 24. The conflict or the struggle is that David really wants to build God a temple. And that's the desire of his heart. And God has told him no. You have blood on your hands. I can't have you building the temple for me. And so David, even though he accepts the no, but he looks around and says, what can I do then? I totally understand that God doesn't want my hands that have blood on them to build the temple, but I love him so much. So I'm going to do everything to make sure that my son has everything he needs to build the temple. And so that's the really neat thing, is that he then begins to prepare, and it's a heart of worship that you can see in these chapters of him taking something that he could have been mad at God for saying no, but instead he turns it into a time of worship while he gathers the stuff, knowing that it will be someday built by his son, and that brings him joy. And so that's the conflict I see there. And also in the Jesus feeds the 5,000, the conflict or the contrast is how the disciples want him to send the people away. They need to go find food. we're not going to find any food here, so just send them home so they can go get food. And the contrast is, or the conflict is, that Jesus says, I want to provide for them. I want to take care of their needs. And then he uses the disciples who didn't even want to help them. They wanted to send them away. He uses the disciples to actually give to them and to provide for them their needs. He has them searching for food, and then he has them passing it out. And then the best part is the conflict turns into a blessing, because the disciples are blessed with the extra leftovers. There's tons left over, and the disciples are blessed by seeing the miracle, by giving. Giving is such a gift to us. We give, and it's a better gift for us. And then for there to be leftovers for them to take home to their families. So that's where I see the conflict and the contrast. What do you guys see in some of these passages? Or if you're studying another passage, tell us what you're studying, where it's found, and what key words, what contrast, what repeated words and phrases there are. I'd love to hear that. But let me show you really quick, as I was studying to do my contrast and conflict. And my biggest contrast and conflict was my cat, who was trying to attack my Bible as I was doing it, my little kitty. So let me show you that real quick. Okay, guys, I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope God shows you some amazing words, and I hope he shows you his love and his compassion for you, or maybe he even convicts you so that you can just have a little growth in your life. I'm just hoping you have an amazing day reading his word today, and I hope you can take this concept on into the future. And just so you know, this concept of finding key words is actually what led me to my word of the year. I do have a playlist in my little playlists that's called Word of the Year, and you can see how, as I began to search and words began to pop off the page, how they became my word of the year. So it could be a word of the day, just something to inspire you, or you know, to correct you. Sometimes we need to be corrected as well, and that is love. So shalom until tomorrow. I'll see you in the next video tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Shalom, my dear friends.